Chuck Miller from Oracle, and I want to take you through our integrated MES, or Manufacturing Execution System, for Oracle's OPM, or Oracle Process Manufacturing. This is our safe harbor statement. I'll give you a minute to read that. As we all know, there are many differences between discrete and process manufacturing. Number one, I think, is the way that they add value. Process manufacturing adds value by formulating a chemical reaction, whereas discrete adds value by assembly and fabrication. And what I mean by a chemical reaction is that when you take the ingredients for chocolate chip cookies, let's say, you don't get a chocolate chip cookie until there's a reaction in the oven. Whereas with discrete, by assembling or fabricating or joining pieces together, you add value. Another difference in manufacturing is that process manufacturing is instruction-based and discrete is task-based. And by instruction-based, very often in pharmaceutical, chemical industries, the sequence in which you add ingredients together often matters. If you add them in the wrong sequence, there could be hazardous consequences for the user. So with instruction-based, there's very often a simple step, which would say mix, but then very, very detailed instructions behind it. Task-based means that there's a series of tasks: milling, drilling, welding, fabrication, in order to make the product. So that's the differences. And what we've done with OPM MES is we've rolled out really robust manufacturing instructions for the user to execute against. And you'll see examples of that, and we're going to go to the software. Looking at the recipe that we're going to use, this is an intermediate chemical. It's got all the recipe, formula, routing stuff associated with it. But notice we have a new checkbox, enhanced process instructions. And what this does is means I am going to do exactly that. I am going to have enhanced instructions through this manufacturing process. So I go to my operations, and I see I have two, pharmacy and mixing. I highlight pharmacy, I go to actions, and I want to see process instructions. What comes up is a summary screen. This is an HTML screen, meaning I can run this on a laptop or a tablet, some kind of mobile device. And here are the summary heading for the instructions that I have for this operation. So as I drill into this, I see I have some detailed instructions underlying here. I have 3 instructions, and in order to execute the batch, I have to execute these instructions. So the first one is merely informational based on safety. Shows that it is mandatory, does not require an electronic signature when I complete it. The second one is label verification for an item that is going to be used on this job. It is mandatory and does require an electronic signature. And the last one involves dispensing an actual material or doing the transaction. This is mandatory and also not required. Another thing we've added with MES is the capability to dispense ingredients into a batch. Dispensing is a pre-weigh operation, so if there's a controlled substance that has to be very tightly regulated by the government and only a few people in the plant have access to handling it, that can be dispensed. In food, very often it is the spice pack that goes into the food. So we allow you to set up items that are going to be dispensed and then issued to the batches. You'll see more about that later. Back at our recipe, I've selected the second operation, taken actions, process instructions, and I see the summary for the mixing operations. And when I drill into those details, I'm skipping the first one because that is simply informational. But in the second set of instructions, I'm going to report against process parameters. As you know, process parameters are user-defined parameters that are created and associated with a resource. These parameters can be feeds, speeds, temperatures, control limits, and that type of stuff. If I am using PLC type integration, I can read that data right from the machine and put it into the batch. This is mandatory and no signature is required. The next set of instructions is simply optional. We'll probably skip by that, but it's just a space holder reminding me to do something and reminding me to check something. I can make these mandatory or optional. The next set of instructions I want to talk about is where we're going to report resource time against this kettle. So it's mandatory, doesn't require a signature, but will report our actual resource usage in the production process. And the last step, we're going to report production. We're going to report the production of all materials that we produce from this batch. And then this is mandatory. We're able to proceed. What I'm going to do is I am going to stop at this stage, go to another user interface because I want to show you the full breadth of the MES system. So I've created a batch. You can see because I've backflushed most of these ingredients, they're already in the actual column when I release the batch. But the item I'm going to dispense is listed as quantity of 0 in the actuals. So this is the batch, these are the ingredients, and these are the two routing steps that we talked about before. Notice that they're both pending, but the batch is in a WIP status. The other thing we've added with dispensing is the ability to assign dispensing operations to individuals who are qualified to do those dispensing tasks. I've got 2 people who are qualified to handle this. Let's say it's a controlled substance, who are qualified to handle this, and I've assigned one this job. So moving on, I want to show you this, which is an HTML screen, but this is a touchscreen user interface. We can use straight HTML. We have touchscreen user interfaces. I don't need to touch the screen. I can use my mouse on this, but it's telling me our batch, this item, this lot number has to be, in this quantity, has to be dispensed. So I'm going to hit the instructions and see what happens. A more detailed set of instructions comes up telling me about scale calibration, and I notice there's an attachment here. So when I click the attachment, a manual comes up indicating how I should proceed if I want to calibrate this scale. Attachments in MES are like attachments in EBS. They can be documents, anything you want, hyperlinks to other systems, videos, anything that's going to help you get the job done. But those attachments are all supported through MES. Now I need to comment on this. I need to acknowledge this, but I am going to add some comments. Comments are going to be part of the electronic batch record. That's the end output of the MES system, is an electronic batch record, and I have indicated what my comments are, and I'm going to hit OK. Notice too, that has completed this step. It is now grayed out, and this step is available for me to comment on and then acknowledge. And I've entered my comments, I hit OK, and now I want to acknowledge this manually. And the acknowledgement on this is electronic signature. Here's my user ID and password. I made this self-approving, meaning I could have routed this through workflow and had somebody else sign on to it and approve it, but I didn't want to get through the process of this demonstration of signing off and signing on a bunch of times. So I made everything self-approving. This follows the regular Oracle workflow convention. I'm going to hit approve, and that'll complete this task. Notice both boxes are grayed out, indicating that they are complete. So I've done the instructions, and I'm going to hit OK. When I hit OK, it brings me to the actual dispensing screen or pre-weigh screen. It is giving me the quantity I need to dispense. I haven't dispensed any. I have filled out the quantity, but haven't hit enter here, and you'll see why in a minute. I can change the scale that is actually doing this weighing. I can choose a different label to print. I'm going to print the standard label, but I could choose others if I have that choice. I included the tare weight of the container because I want to have that, but I don't need to use the tare weight. And I can change the dispensing booth. Dispensing booth is simply the dispensing location that I am situated in. I'm dispensing lot 1 to this batch, and I can do full containers or partial containers, and I can reverse dispense. The container has defaulted for me, as has my tare weight, and I entered in the quantity. 12.2 plus 2 means 14.2. These dials next to the quantity are indications of if I had an integrated scale, I could just simply hit these buttons, these dials, and it would pull in the scale weights for me. So could do it by hand as I'm doing it, or if I have scale integration, I can go through and just do it in that manner. So when I hit continue, it shows me that the quantity that's going to be dispensed, and it matches the quantity I want to dispense, and I hit continue. Notice here too, I have a couple messages telling me this dispense was successful with the dispense number and that the label print request has been started. So this is where I'm at. I dispense these items. Now I go back to the batch because I have other instructions that I wanted to reach. So I did dispensing with dispensing instructions, and now I have to complete the job. And I have other instructions. Here are the two operations. And I'm going to go through and release the first operations. Notice I don't have to go back to forms to do this. I can do everything within MES. And now it's telling me I can complete it as the next step. Now, I'll get an error message if I do that because there's instructions I need to execute. So bringing up the details, I see that I have some instructions here that I want to comment on. I enter my comments. This is a safety thing about protective clothing. And I've completed the first set of instructions. So now I have to do some label verification. I hit comments, enter my comments into the system, hit OK. And again, electronic records, electronic signature comes up, and the same thing I said before where this is self-approving. Well, I've gone this far, and now I've come to the last stage where I want to do my dispensing. But what I'm going to do is change user interfaces. I don't want you to think that everybody has to have a touchscreen user interface in their system. I've gone right to the HTML screen. So as I go through this process, I am going to issue the item and complete the instruction. This is the same capability, just demonstrated with the touchscreen user interface. I should mention at this time that these buttons are configurable by the user, so you can define them. I find it easy for myself to put what I want to do on the button, so I know exactly what I'm going to do. So I'm going to hit that and issue it, and back to the batch, you'll see that the quantity has been dispensed. The 12.2 kilos that I wanted have been applied to this job. When I look at the routing, I see that the pharmacy stage has been completed, and now I can go and proceed to work on the mixing and finish this batch. I release the mixing step, and I want to hit the details associated with that, and I see that I have more instructions that I have to execute. So I'm going to enter comments on here. Comments are optional, but the reason I enter comments in is, as I said before, they're going to be part of the electronic batch record, which is going to be chapter and verse. So it's another way to acknowledge that something has been done, because God forbid there's a recall on this 6 months later, I'll have a record of what was said against this batch. Hit OK. The first instruction is done. Comments on the second, where I'm told to set the kettle to the correct temperature and speed. I hit OK. And again, my configurable button, report kettle temp and RPM. I take that and the process parameters come up. Remember, process parameters are user defined, and you can have a number of them on here. I elected to put 2, which is temperature, which I've entered in manually, and speed, which I have also entered in manually, which hit my target values. I want to draw your attention to this icon on the lower right. This indicates if I had PLCs that I integrated to, I can take that data right from the PLC and read it and apply it to this record. So the PLC information can update the batch. I'm going to hit OK on this, and I come to the next instruction, which is optional. In the interest of time, I'm going to bypass this instruction and go to the next one where I report kettle usage. Comments again, that I'm ready to report usage. You can write a book in here. I've kept these brief just to illustrate the point. I hit OK. I hit kettle usage. I had some problems when I ran this kettle at first, and you can see when I started and when I ended for a little bit over an hour, I had downtime. This is an OPM reason code, which is going to update any KPIs that I have in the system. If I'm using Manufacturing Operations Center, this is going to update those downtime calculations. So the machine was down for an hour, and then when it came back up, I ran it for an hour. There was one machine involved in both cases. There's no reason code for good production because it's good production. And if I was reporting or scheduling to the actual instance of the machine, I could list or have the instance number appear here. So I know exactly where this record was occurring. So we've reported downtime, we've reported our machine time, could also have reported labor if I had labor in this routing too. Any resource can be reported against in MES. So this looks good to me. I'm going to hit OK, and it comes to the last operation. I am actually going to not do the last operation here because I want to go to the other HTML screen to report the operation. A couple of things I want to point your attention to. The status of all my tasks are listed here. This one is optional, so I'm not going to do it. This shows it's pending, and there's also a message that we've saved the instruction tasks. You have some pending instructions that you still have to do. So I couldn't close the batch out because I've got mandatory instructions I have to address, and that's all this is telling me. I'm going to jump to the HTML screen now, and I bring it up and bring up my batch that we've been working with. You'll notice that the selection box for the first operation is gray because this is completed, but the second one I can get into. When I get into, it brings the status over. Check mark means complete, so I'm able to see where I'm at with this. I want to make clear that I didn't have to run a synchronization program. There was no batch program running in the background. MES is simply another user interface and another way to access batches and report transactions against the batch. So I can do it all through MES and only have to go to forms to create the batch. So I'm going to execute my last instruction, jumped ahead a little bit, reported the kettle usage and all that stuff. Instructions complete, and we're going to report the production for this particular item against the batch. When I hit finish, I go back to the batch and I can see that my stages have been completed. So we saw that all the material was available, all the steps have been completed, and we've created production. The next step in the MES process is to show you the electronic batch record. We have a master batch record and a control batch record. Master batch record is the batch at standard, everything I should have done, everything I should have used. The control batch record are the actual transactions that have occurred against the batch. So I can see this batch was released at this time. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. We'll see that the item that we dispensed is listed here. The dispense number, which matched the message we had gotten, the lot, the date. It was a full container. I needed 12.2 kilos. I issued 12.2 kilos, required an electronic signature. Here are the instructions. These are the standard instructions. This is my user ID, the date, but also my comments are associated with these instructions. In addition to that, it picks up the electronic signature that was done, and it also shows me the pallet label that was created during the MES process. It's important to note, and I forgot to mention this before, is that quality specifications and samples can be associated with operations within MES. So I can come to a quality stage, say I need to take a test, hit acknowledge, and the testing screen will pop up so I can take a sample. It's all integrated with the MES. When I scroll down a little bit more, I see the item that we produced. Here's the lot number. Its status goes to QC check, so it's going to fire off a workflow for this item, for this quantity of 2,000 liters. So that's MES. That's a brief overview. Thank you very much for your time.